Hi there, guys. Great to have you around, and a huge welcome to the Holy Shed. It's been quite a week in my little life, I can tell you. Talk about busy. I haven't a clue what retirement means, and I have absolutely no intention of finding out. I wasn't actually sure I was even going to make it here to be with you today, but here I am. Not, as you may discern, in the Holy Shed, if one point of fact, but in the dining room of two very lovely friends, Sarah and Bill, in Ealing. Actually, you can see these lovely curtains behind, pride and joy of Sarah, I think, so had to get them included. But we're here in Ealing because this morning, courtesy of Sarah, I was preaching in St Barnabas Church. And I talk from Isaiah 45 on, well, you could call it Cyrus, the bad Christian. Yeah, well, if you want to know more, you can probably find out by getting a copy from their website. Anyway, do you know that bit in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy and Toto, her dog, are in the basket of the balloon and they're ready to leave for Kansas? And just before they go, Toto leaps out, and so Dorothy, of course, jumps out to follow him. At that moment, the balloon begins to rise, with the wizard still in it. Come back, Dorothy calls, to which the wizard replies, I can't. I don't know how it works. It's a good moment. But that's actually how I feel about prayer. I know from experience that there's something there, that in some way it works. At least I do know that God has an effect upon things in the world, but I can't possibly say that I know how that works. I can give my thoughts and ideas, which of course I intend to. But I definitely don't trust any formulas about prayer. But however many questions I may have about it at times, I just can't stop myself from doing it. Prayer somehow is integral to my life in a very significant way. Excuse me. It's water, I can tell you. Anyway, this is what I want to talk about, the mystery of prayer, that I suspect I won't actually get properly into talking about that today, maybe next time. But this week, it's more like a bit of preparation. It's getting into the kind of landscape out of which prayer arises, you might say. I think that most of the problems that we have about understanding prayer, why it does or doesn't work, stem from the image that we have of God. I said last week, I think the only really significant question in the world of theology and religion is, what kind of God are we talking about? What kind of God do you imagine or experience in your life? For many people, prayer arises from a vision of God as this, we've talked about this super being, this supernatural being in the heavens who is almighty, all powerful, able to do, in principle, absolutely anything according to his will. And prayer is our way of trying to, I suppose, persuade God, implore God to intervene in matters or circumstances in our lives or the lives of others, or of the world indeed, that concern us. When our prayers seemingly go unanswered, the frequent assumption is that either it wasn't God's will, or that we lacked faith, or that we did something else wrong. Whichever way, it sort of seems to point back to us, and God gets to have the divine cake and eat it. The pastoral implications of this situation can be enormous. People end up feeling guilty or failures where prayer is concerned, or they feel hurt or puzzled as to why it is that God doesn't appear to will something that seems so eminently right and important to whoever we are. And this can vary from, why doesn't God heal my little boy from cancer, to why didn't God intervene for people who begged for help when being marched into gas chambers? I have witnessed the pastoral carnage of unanswered prayers, people feeling, as I say, like failures or guilty, and all these kinds of things. Personally, I just don't see it that way at all. And I've worked hard to liberate people wherever I can from those kinds of feelings and reactions. Most importantly, I don't picture God like that in the first place. I've already stated that I don't believe in divine omnipotence, certainly not as it is commonly believed in and explained in places I've heard it anyway. It is, after all, an abstract idea, isn't it? A theoretical issue for most of us. I mean, which of us can even start to get our heads around the idea of absolute power? And wherever we've seen or heard of anything that at all resembles it, it's usually not good. It's the power of a totalitarian regime or a dreadful, unopposable tyrant. I mean, I completely believe in divine power. I completely believe that God is very, very powerful, the most powerful force in the universe, so far as I know. But that's different to saying that God has all the power, that God can do absolutely anything. And personally, I don't see any reason to affirm such a thing when there are so many reasons not to believe it, so many things that, seem to contradict and undermine that sort of belief. In what way, I ask, is God diminished by questioning omnipotence or complete power to control, when basically God is love? That's the only really thing. The Bible never says God is power. It says God is love. And love is never about control. That's just the antithesis of love. Love is never about control. The power of love is quite a different thing to power to do whatever I wish. And here's the thing. The Hebrew term most often translated almighty, all powerful in our English Bibles, is El Shaddai. But as umpteen Hebrew sources make clear, this El Shaddai does not mean almighty or omnipotent. It's much more conveying all sufficient, which again is quite a different thing, and I find a much more helpful thing to focus on and contemplate where God is concerned. Rabbi Jill Hausman, for example, points out that El means God, and Shaddai derives from a word meaning enough or sufficient. So El Shaddai means the God who provides. And she says it could also be God the nurturer, which is reinforced by another link of Shaddai with Shaddayim, meaning breasts. Oh yes, God is the mother who feeds us, takes care of us, and provides. And along a similar line, Rabbi Arthur Waskow says El Shaddai can be translated actually as the breasted God. All the blessings, he says, in which Shaddai is over and over invoked in particularly Genesis, he says, are about fruitfulness and fertility. It's a naming of God which is rich in maternal imagery, which somehow or other ended up sounding more like a macho super being. And in the Greek New Testament, the word Pantocrator is sometimes translated also as Lord Almighty. It appears only 10 times actually in the New Testament, and 9 of them, by the way, are in the book of Revelation, where it's used in depictions of heavenly battles between the armies of God and the forces of Satan. It's a compound word with the prefix pan, meaning all. But in the New Testament, the verb form of the word krat is translated hold, seize, cling, attain, or something similar. In other words, the verb form isn't used to convey controlling or doing absolutely everything or having all the power. It is much more to do with that sense of holding. And so in a similar way to the notion of a breasted God, God's maternal sustenance toward the world, I also very much like this image of Christ upholding the world in love. So if we shift away from a notion of powerless humans pleading with an all-powerful super being in the heavens, then how can we picture God? Because I think that is where so much damage is done on so many levels in terms of people trying to believe in that sort of God, or it being the kind of God that people can't believe in at all. I particularly love the image that St. Paul gives in the book of Acts of God being that in which we live and move and have our being, the all-sustaining presence that surrounds and holds us. In more modern terms, I have often interpreted this to say God is like the atmosphere that is all around us, or the air that is around us and which we breathe, which fills us and sustains us. Without the atmosphere, without the air within the atmosphere, there would be no life on Earth. We would just be another dead planet floating around like those images we see of the moon. A similar but alternative version is to imagine ourselves and all creation as being like fish or sea creatures living in the vastness of the ocean, which is God. The fish couldn't live outside the ocean, though I guess they have no consciousness that it exists. I think, fish would be ocean atheists, if you like. There's nothing to believe in. It just is. It's where they are. It's where they live. It's how they exist. And I think that, to me, is very much what life is for us as human beings, except that we have developed consciousness. We have developed inquiry and curiosity and thinking and imagining and rationalizing. And so we're aware that there is something, and that's, I guess, what theology is really all about in its original form. I've used both of these images, the image of the atmosphere being God or the ocean. I've used both of these when I've been speaking to especially non-religious groups of people or atheist audiences. And I've found that, for many people, this makes a lot more sense than, the typical pictures of a big guy in the sky, which have probably done as much as anything else to prosper atheism, to turn away generations of modern people from any notion of faith. A woman in a pub where I addressed a philosophy club. I love a philosophy club in a pub, don't you? There was this woman in one of the groups that I was addressing who was sitting on a settee not far in front of me, and she wept through much of what I said. I don't think it was because the talk was so awful, but I just sensed, hey, something's going on here. And so afterwards, I went to her and I said, "Are you okay?" So she said, "Oh, Dave," she said, "if only I had met you years ago. The way God was presented to me in my Catholic upbringing is what made me into an atheist before I was 20 years of age. What I'm hearing you say is so different. And I'm weeping because I'm welcoming it. And I'm actually now looking forward to giving faith from your perspective another go in my life." Wow. You see, the ocean and atmosphere metaphors focus on a vast complex of interrelationships, of each of us being connected to each other and God by the divine presence which surrounds and holds us. So our relationships, whether we think of it as being in the ocean or being just within the atmosphere that we understand, that is the thing that connects us to every other person and to every other living being. God is so vast, more than one, little fish like me could ever imagine. But even fish who are far, far away from me are nevertheless connected with me by the God who surrounds and holds everything. We're all connected in God, regardless of race or ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, or geographical distance. It doesn't matter how vast the sea is and how far away we are from other creatures like ourselves. It is the sea. It is that presence, all-encompassing presence of God that holds us all together and which connects us. So it is through God, no matter what the distance, it is through God that in some shape or form I can affect or connect with you or others who are close at hand or far, far away. Now, these are just metaphors, of course, as are all the ways in which we think about and speak about God. And metaphors can be overstretched, right? Some may retain vibrancy and others wear thin and lose resonance. So I think the big question for us is, how do we best picture God today in our world? Because I think that some of the existing and you know in the metaphors that we inherited no longer resonate with people. For me personally, these more ecological metaphors of atmosphere and ocean and sustaining presence are much more helpful than, say, for instance, a king ruling on high or a lord with subjects. These things do not help in my personal search for an understanding of who or what God may be. And it seems to me that's the case for an awful lot of people in our world today. Picturing and relating to God in the ways that I suggest open up quite different notions of prayer. So to begin with, they intimate a relationship between God and the world, which is based on interaction rather than intervention. God isn't separate and outside looking in. God's inside. God is integral within and deeply interconnected with me, with all of us, with life on earth. In theological terms, what I am talking about is called panentheism, not classic theism, which means God is totally separate from and outside of the world, and not pantheism, which means God and the world are completely absorbed into each other and completely one and the same. No, what we're talking about is panentheism, and the little n in the middle means in. Panentheism, God is within everything, and everything is within God, which is precisely what Paul describes, I think, in speaking of the one in whom we live and move and have our being. God is in all, and God and all is in God. What we're talking about really is a relational theology, and this is, very much what process theology that we've been thinking about in recent weeks is all about. It can be defined as a relational theology, and a relational theology of prayer as the starting point, that God works with the world as it is in order to bring it to where it can be. So the point being, God works with. It's that sense of interrelationship and connectedness. God works with the world as it is in order to bring it to where it can be. And this occurs through a cooperative and co-creative relationship between God and the world and us. So this really is my starting point with prayer. It's not God, the grand controller in the sky behind the great mixing desk, as it were, deciding what he will or won't do, though he could in fact do absolutely anything he wanted. No, rather, it is God immersed in the world, wooing and nudging everything and everyone toward their greater possible goal in becoming a peaceful, loving and just reflection of God, of the divine image. I love the thought of divine breasts. I love the thought of a munificent, all-sufficient God who doesn't browbeat the world into submission, but rather woos and persuades with love toward the goal of becoming all that we can be. And I'm pretty sure that prayer plays a part in all of that. How does that work? Well, I'm not going to seek the advice of any religious wizards, uh, but I will go on to share some of my thoughts about this next time. But I think it'd be great, if we could all just go away and contemplate this. Actually, I think that the thought of picturing God as being this atmosphere that holds and sustains us is such a beautiful posture to be in. And I like the idea of just falling back into that rather than trying to reach out to and speak to, a God on a throne far away out there. So it makes prayer a different kind of experience, really. One that is much more kind of about letting go and falling into God rather than reaching out and trying to attain toward God. So we'll carry on next time. Meanwhile, here is a prayer that sort of gets hold of some of this. I don't believe in a man in the sky, big brother listening in on every conversation, grim-faced at our stupidities and keeping count of gaffes, foibles and offences. I don't believe in religious elitism. It's our way or be damned. I don't believe in cheap biblical put-downs or final claims to truth. I don't believe in proofs of God's existence, mind games claiming certitude in the face of unfathomable mystery. No. I believe in tentative efforts at truth, shuffling metaphors and symbols which point and nudge, which cannot claim to reveal anything for certain, yet open windows on faith's imagination. I believe in genuflecting when passing majestic trees or witnessing a sunset over the ponds and roosting ducks on Clapham Common. I believe in kindness toward strangers, a sign of peace toward enemies, sharing bread and wine with those whose vision of the world I do not understand. I believe that with every breath of fresh air we inhale the Spirit, that every plot of earth is infused with divinity, that every broken heart is held, every joyful hope shared. I believe in the God who plays in the playfulness of puppies, who sings in the darkness with nightingales, who lays down with the sick, weeps with the bereaved, and roars for justice when the hungry go unfed, the marginalized are unheard, and Mother Earth and her creatures are desecrated through human greed. I believe in God. I believe in this God. Amen. Well, hey, there you go. As you've already seen, I do have a glass of water here, and I'm sure you've got a glass or a cup of something around. So just grab a hold of it right now, would you, as we sort of finish with our kind of holy shed little ritual of a toast to life. So I propose a toast to the God who surrounds and envelops us, even when we're totally unaware of God's presence. A toast to the God who lurks around the corners of our life, waiting to surprise us or bring us help when needed. A toast to a God whose motherly love woos and allures us into better ways rather than browbeating us. To life, l'chaim. Well, there you go, guys. Thank you for being with me for this short time. And if you like what I'm doing here, you like this Holy Shed thing, you can support us. You can buy us a coffee. All you need to do is follow the link which is on your screen here. And we are deeply grateful for all of you who do this or support us in lots of other ways. Maybe thinking about us, sending out a prayer or two for us, sending an encouraging note or message. It's all good and lovely, and we appreciate it very much indeed. And I think I'm going to be off for a sit down now, really. So thanks for being with me here today, and I hope that you find some pleasure and stimulation in pondering these things. And, we'll get together and talk about it some more next time. So have a great week. Be kind to the world round about you. Be kind to strangers as well as friends. Most of all, be kind to yourself. Stay human. And I'll see you very soon. Bye.